Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
There's a need for more units, probably more vouchers, more Hano landlords.
Hurricane Ida exacerbating an already difficult housing market.
They love what we catch, but nobody wants to help me maintain my ability to catch it.
Seafood leaders say help is promised, but where is it?
Everyone needs to be doing their part.
Trying to put the brakes on rising domestic violence.
Hi, I'm Kara St. Cyr.
And I'm Andre Moreau. First tonight, shots in the arms of children. This week, the CDC recommended that youngsters ages 5 to 11 get the Pfizer vaccine. President Biden talked about it this week, saying the U.S. is well equipped to vaccinate all 28 million children in that age group.
We've already secured enough vaccine supply for every single child in America ages 5 through 11. And weeks ago, we asked states and pharmacies to put together their detailed plan to start placing their orders for these specially formulated vaccines for young children. We started packing and shipping these orders last week as soon as the FDA authorized the vaccine.
State public health leaders say Louisiana will receive 148,000 doses of the pediatric vaccine. Dr. Joseph Cantor of the Department of Health expects providers to have those doses of the vaccine by the end of next week, and that number will be enough to vaccinate 35% of the children in the state.
Louisiana's vaccination rate remains stagnant. Currently, 2.2 million people are fully vaccinated. That's only about 47%, though, of the population. In an effort to get everyone vaccinated, the Shot for $100 incentive program has been extended until November 30th. Anyone receiving their first dose of the vaccine is eligible. And now to other headlines around the state.
This week, Governor John Bel Edwards touted Louisiana's future with alternative energies like solar and wind. He did so before an international audience at the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow, Scotland. Edwards said to have the economy of the future we want, where we continue as an energy-producing state, we're going to have to do more things like embrace wind energy. Authorities arrested and charged 3 people from Vernon Parish with human trafficking and rape in connection with the alleged sex trafficking of a child over the span of 4 years. This tragic case involving a young girl that began when she was only 8 years old is an example of a widespread societal breakdown few want to talk about. A big finding in the re-examined autopsy ordered by the FBI in the deadly 2019 arrest of Ronald Green near Monroe. The evidence rejects the claim by state police that a car crash caused his fatal injuries. The second look confirms what Green's family suspected the moment they saw his battered body and only slightly damaged car, that the minor crash after a high-speed chase had nothing to do with his death. Voters in the state's November 13th election will decide on changes that would rewrite state sales and income tax laws. They'd more closely match the regulations of other states. GOP lawmakers pushed the amendments. They got overwhelming bipartisan backing and support from the governor. Governor Edwards describes them as real physical reform for the state. A $4 million gift by Ochsner Health will establish the Ochsner Wellness Center in the newly renovated Huey P. Long Fieldhouse at LSU. Capital outlay funding and philanthropic donations are helping pay for the $29 million revamp of the historic Fieldhouse, once the epicenter of student life and LSU's first student union back in 1932.
Hurricane Ida dealt the state's seafood industry another blow when it roared through, and recovery has barely begun. But one of the industry's most vocal leaders told me it's just the latest in a series of setbacks that since Katrina just keep on coming. George Barisich is a full-time shrimper and oyster farmer. He's also president of the United Commercial Fishermen's Association.
The headlines you're hearing now is basically because of the storm.
Hurricane Ida is the storm George Barisich, a major face of Louisiana's commercial fishing industry, is talking about. But Barisich says there are all kinds of storms that threaten the existence of Louisiana's precious and acclaimed seafood industry. Others include the catastrophic storm stirred by the BP oil spill, the storm of government regulations, or lack of them.
50% of the people on the west side of the river from Grand Isle West, they're gone. The boats are gone, the docks are gone, the houses are gone, and that's hurricane. That's a act of God.
So hurricane damage.
Hurricane damage, okay. But what we never ever see is the damage that's bipartisan. The only thing that's been bipartisan for the last 30 years is the abandonment of the domestic fishing industry by the federal government. I'm gonna give you, for instance, Hurricane Katrina hit.
Okay.
Right before that, they had a tsunami. They sent $400 million to Indonesia, all right, to help them. Okay, Good Samaritan kind of stuff. Louisiana had a $365 million infrastructure loss, fishing. We got 58 million. And these are the people that make the 400 million that stimulate the economy.
Right.
What's wrong with that picture?
Barisich is a regular in Washington and has fought for decades pleading for help from our many congressional delegations.
I go see every one of them. We get to see everyone.
Cassidy,
Kennedy, and the ones before, the ones before, the ones before, the ones before. I've been
what
doing
are they
this.
telling you?
I'm disappointed. We have no stroke. They all said they're going to help. Steve Scalise, the last time I saw him in Kenner, opening day of shrimp season. I said, Steve, do you understand what's going on? I'm not out there shrimping. I'm talking to you. This is 8 years I'm talking to you, and we're not getting any help. We keep getting promises.
One of his biggest concerns is over the epic $2 billion Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Project, a key piece of the state's $50 billion coastal master plan. Governor John Bell Edwards and the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, CPRA, says it's the lifeline our vanishing coast needs. Construction of the engineering feat is expected in 2022, though recent developments could delay the start. While the Army Corps of Engineers has given the plan a mostly green light, it strongly cautions the major adverse permanent impact on shrimp and oysters. The Marine Mammal Commission goes further. It says the infusion of polluted fresh water from the Mississippi River will kill off most of the bottlenose dolphins in Barataria Basin. Hundreds die whenever the Bonnie Carey Spillway opens to prevent flooding in New Orleans. An ecological marker, dolphins are at the top of the food chain, the canaries in the coal mine.
How can I support a freshwater diversion when I know it's going to put me out of business and it's not going to build the land that they want to build? If you start pumping, you can build land tomorrow, okay? And we showed them, we explained to them, there's areas where they accidentally pump land out of a canal, and there's land there now, it's just high. And it's still, but not even on purpose. We showed them at things that have been pumped out of, but they don't want to do it. They want to do these large-scale freshwater diversions. I said, why don't you pump it and do a small-scale freshwater diversion and maintain it? Our industry can take some fresh water, it can, but it's like flushing the toilet. You can't do that and expect shrimp, crabs, and fish, which is a brackish water environment, especially oysters. Oysters is a very delicate balance to survive.
Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser agrees with Barisich. So do the parish councils of Plaquemines, St. Bernard, and St. Tammany parishes. Like Barisich, Nungesser says a better, faster way is to build land now through dredging and the restoration of barrier islands. In an editorial to the Advocate newspaper, he said the CPRA's plan is deeply flawed, that it's nothing more than another insider deal. Barisich is Croatian. His parents were born there, but came to Louisiana when he was young. His family is part of the close-knit Croatians of Lower Plaquemines Parish, little known to most Louisianans, but said to have built the oyster industry that has made Louisiana famous.
A commercial fisherman is an eternal optimist. You leave the dock, you don't know if you're coming back, okay? Commercial fishing is the most dangerous occupation in the world. More people die from commercial fishing than any other occupation. I don't know if you knew that.
Parishes himself almost became a statistic in January 2020. His boat caught fire while shrimping on Lake Bourne. The Coast Guard rescued him in time.
It's in here.
Okay.
You understand that there's something that's innate.
Which is why he'll do all he can to protect it.
You seem like Southeast Louisiana, Southwest Louisiana, it seems like you're redheaded stepchildren. Commercial fishermen like you're redheaded stepchildren. It's really sad the amount of disrespect we get.
But have you ever talked to anybody that didn't say, I love Louisiana seafood, I live for it? The restaurants that make their business and entice people from all over the world to come and eat in New Orleans and other places.
And
it's because of the seafood.
I
right?
supply a lot of seafood to a lot of them chefs, okay? And like I said, it's ironic that they love what we catch, but nobody wants to help me maintain my ability to catch it.
Parishes tells me today in 2021, 6,500 make a living as a commercial fisherman compared to 30,000, the number back in the 1970s.
Hurricane Ida exacerbated an affordable housing crisis in Louisiana. As the housing supply took a hit, rent prices are through the roof. I talked with several people displaced by Ida and Veronica Reed, the executive director of Jane's Place Neighborhood Sustainability Initiative. On Hurricane Katrina's 16th anniversary, winds of 150 miles per hour pelted South Louisiana. On the East Bank in New Orleans, 10 inches of rain fell on Orwood Creek, where Shannon Paxton lives. Her apartment was destroyed, ruining several irreplaceable objects in the process.
Some of the things I make, because I'm in the culture, they be having sentimental value. And so it's stuff like that. I don't think people realize how much that means to people until it's them.
With no power, mold, mildew, and water soaked through the walls, Paxton's apartment quickly became unbearable.
The apartment the complex deemed the apartment unlivable, so I have to move. And what's been so hard about that is financially it's difficult because all of the places that they have available have skyrocketed on what they want for rent.
Exhausted, Shannon wondered where she was going to move. She'd only lived here for a year before Hurricane Ida destroyed it. Now Paxton is being thrust into a difficult housing market, one Veronica Reed, the executive director of Jane's Place Neighborhood Sustainability, says has been getting steadily worse when Hurricane Katrina rocked the city's housing market.
For the majority of New Orleanians, Hurricane Katrina was the point that tended to expose sort of like the depth and breadth of the housing crisis that was New Orleans. But it also was exacerbated by the sort of like the wholesale loss of units that came with Hurricane Katrina.
After a big storm like Katrina or Ida, things are thrown out of whack for months and sometimes years. Prices for housing increase, often due to limited supply. If a large number of homes are damaged, they may not be livable for months or even years. In a study from the Federal Bank Reserve of Dallas, economists found that hurricanes make prices rise shortly after, and the increase peaks around 3 or 4% about 3 years after the storm, which can cause a housing nightmare for people like Paxton.
I really can't afford to go more than $1,000. And then I've been looking different areas. I'm not really picky about the area per se, but so much has changed. It's just like the homeowners have skyrocketed their rent for their, apartments or houses, a duplex, whatever. The rent has went up, so it's making it harder to afford.
In Houma, Kezia Sitawin has also seen these trends up close. Hurricane Ida hit Terrebonne Parish with winds strong enough to knock out the power for weeks.
Sitowin's apartment complex was among some of the severely damaged properties in the parish. Parts of her roof caved in, while the rest of her home filled with water and eventually mold.
My own apartment didn't survive Ida. Like, we had ceiling damage and mold and mildew, accelerated growth, and all my furniture was not salvageable. So my lease was terminated.
Sitowin commuted 4 hours daily, driving from Lafayette to Houma for a while, before ultimately making the decision to live in her office at the Houma Courier. She's cramped into a small space with an air mattress and her dog. While in the process of looking for a new place, Sitowin says the prices in a once affordable town like Houma have dramatically increased.
My reporting has touched upon, and talking with other residents here in Houma and down the bayou, it's that there are no units available. And for the units, or a lot of units aren't available. And for the units that are available, if you just take a brief look at apartments.com or on Craigslist, those 2-3 bedroom apartments per se are now marked up to $2,000 when regular market value would be closer to $700, $800. And I guess those things are just things I have to look into more, but it is really frustrating to see that so many in our community are being failed at every level.
Reed says that the problems creating an affordable housing crisis are a lot bigger than just hurricanes. Cost of living, access to jobs, short-term rentals, and a lack of clearly defined tenant laws are to blame for the rising cost, especially in big cities like New Orleans.
I mean, there's a need for more units, probably more vouchers, or more units that accept vouchers. There's a need for more funding so that nonprofits and developers who build affordable housing can actually, sort of have the funding to do it. And then there's probably a need for permanent affordability, right? A lot of the funding that comes, that supports affordable housing has a time frame attached to it. 15 years, 30 years, seems like a long time when you're doing it. But you know what, 15 years, we're 15 years out from Katrina now, aren't we?
Finding a new home has been a challenge for Paxton, and time is ticking. If she can't find a place to stay, she may have to leave the city and her community behind.
No one should have to go through hell trying to find somewhere to live.
Since we interviewed both Sitowin and Paxton, they were finally able to find new housing. Both are focused on picking up the pieces from months of their lives being on hold.
A St. Francisville man was relentless in the pursuit of his estranged wife. 3 weeks before, he broke in, shot her, and then turned the gun on himself. In one afternoon, he violated a restraining order 5 times. He had an ankle bracelet. None of this stopped him. None of the system made to stop him did. It's an example of the worst of domestic violence. It happened just in October. Mariah Wineski is executive director of the Louisiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And I'm so glad to talk to you about this because we've seen the increasing statistics and how much more challenging has COVID made your mission against domestic violence.
We have seen a significant increase over the last, especially in 2021, but beginning in 2020, a significant increase in the severity of cases that we're seeing, in the level of violence that we're seeing, and in the number.
There were lockdowns, a loss of income. Those contribute, people being held together. And then when suddenly people are not having to be locked down, it doesn't just immediately eliminate that, does it?
Right. So COVID, part of what it didn't magically cause more domestic violence, right? But what it did is it created a social environment where domestic violence can flourish. So you have your increase in isolation was a huge component, right? So you're separated from your support systems. That makes it harder for victims to seek safety. So that's been the main issue, is that over the last year and a half, with the various effects of COVID-19, we have seen an increase in barriers that victims face
Sure.
when they're trying to get to safety.
Tell me all about the program that and the things that you do to help victims.
Sure. So we are the statewide network of domestic violence shelter and advocacy organizations. So we have 16 member programs all across the state. Those programs provide emergency shelter, counseling, legal advocacy, children's services, safety planning, a wide array of services for domestic violence victims. And we also operate a 24-hour statewide hotline for domestic violence. And then in addition to those direct services, we also have a social change and legislative advocacy component. So we do work on legislation to try to improve the laws around domestic violence, and also try to educate the public and change some of those social conditions that allow domestic violence to happen.
And what are some of the things that you've had to work on maybe differently or different ways because of this past year and a half?
So we have done a lot of listening over the last year and a half, really truly listening to what survivors need and what they say they need. And we've taken those issues and we've found ways, to the best of our ability, to decrease those new barriers that have come up in survivors' lives. So one thing that we've done is we've focused on meeting survivors' needs outside of a domestic violence shelter setting. So for example, we've secured additional funding to get rental assistance for domestic violence survivors and utility assistance. So let's say they don't necessarily want to come into shelter, or they don't need to come into shelter, but they're having a hard time maintaining their financial independence apart from their abuser.
You've worked all over the U.S., you've worked internationally, and of course in Louisiana. I'm curious, how does Louisiana stack up in terms of the laws and the protections against people?
So Louisiana actually has really good, strong, progressive laws on the books. What we struggle with in Louisiana is implementation of those laws. So a lot of our laws are not appropriately or consistently enforced statewide.
And somehow that St. Francisville case is an example of not being enforced.
Yes, and there's even a statewide, only about 50% of restraining orders that are issued are ever even served to the defendant. And so if an order isn't served, then of course it's really difficult to enforce, right? Yeah. So you've got implementation issues in our state. And we've actually, even before COVID, we in Louisiana consistently have led the nation in the rate of women murdered by men. So this has been something that we've been dealing with for a long time, 20 plus years, we've led the nation. And so we have this underlying, these systemic issues in the way that we address domestic violence. And then the pandemic came and hurricanes came, and they've exacerbated all of those pre-existing issues.
So what do we need to know? What does the average person need to know?
I would say that it's important to keep in mind that domestic violence, if we want to stop and prevent domestic violence homicides, then every single entity, whether it's systemic or individual, everyone needs to be doing their part. So not just the victim services, of course there's a lot that we need to do, but on the criminal justice side, are we looking at everything that we need to be looking at? Are we adequately assessing risk that somebody poses to their victim before we set bond, before we decide what interventions we're going to do in a criminal justice manner, right? And then as an individual.
Yeah, I suppose as friends or family, if you see something, expects, or suspicious of something, report it, say something.
Yeah, the most important thing that an individual can do is if you know somebody who is experiencing domestic violence and you're concerned for their safety, talk to them about it. Tell them that you're concerned. Explain to them what you see in their relationship that's making you concerned for their safety, and let them know that you will be there for them no matter what, that you will always support them no matter what they decide to do, right? Don't give them the ultimatum of leave or else. Don't do that, right? But always support them no matter what, and then refer them to the resources that are available to help them.
Yeah, they already live in an ultimatum situation.
Exactly.
They don't need another one, right?
Yeah, you don't want to play into that abuser's isolation.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
If you've been keeping up with Safe Haven, you know we've put together a total of 8 episodes for you to watch. Now, we won't be airing any more of those on S.W.I, but I wanted to give you a sneak peek of this week's episode, which highlights Poro's Beauty School in New Orleans and Carrie's Beauty School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Take a look.
It's hard to believe if I were to travel just 70 years ago, this little guide could potentially save my life. I'm Kara St. Cyr, and this is Safe Haven, Louisiana's Green Book. When I was a little girl, I learned a very valuable lesson. Hair is never just hair, for Black women anyway, and it never has been.
Hi, I'm going to show you how you and Ultra Sheen can find a fantastic new hairstyle. It's called an Ultra Natural.
If you want to watch the rest of this episode of Safe Haven, you can head to our YouTube page where you can not only watch that, but you can catch up on all the episodes that you've missed. That's the link right there on your screen.
Big congratulations to Cameron Parish Port Director Claire Marceau. We have spoken to her several times this past year about hurricane recovery. At this week's World LNG Summit in Lake Charles, Marceau was named America's LNG and Gas Female Executive of the Year. She said it was surreal having the world event in the city that is still battered, Lake Charles. No one, though, more deserving. Congratulations to Claire Marceau. Love to hear that. That's our show for this week, everyone. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are with our LPB app.
You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow.
And I'm Kara St. Cyr.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.